The art doesn't do it for me. The art doesn't do it for me. I legitimately had no interest in this game. Hey, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing The Nightmare Cathedral, a game from Board and Dice over on GameFound. You can check that out. There's a link in the description down below. Everything you see here is prototype, rules, components, all that stuff subject to change, and some of that's relevant because I do have complaints and critiques around a game that I legitimately, like I said already, had no interest in this game, although now I am, well, very interested. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's go into it more. What is this game? Why did I have no interest? Mostly the art and theme, honestly. It doesn't really do it for me. Why do I really like it a lot now, and I'm very intrigued to continue to see this develop? Well, we'll talk about that. The game, at its core, is an area control game. It's an area control game, a little bit ish. The ish part is that while area control is a big factor in it, it's not by any means the be-all and end-all. You're going to have these various regions on the board, these nightmare regions or whatever they are, as you try to wander around accomplishing your various goals, because you're going to have these dream cards. Like a big source of your points in the game are going to come from dream cards, trying to accomplish your goals every single turn, which sometimes have what to do with area control, but other times have entirely different aspects going on, which is why ultimately being in different areas is important, but it's not the pure battle drama you were or were not expecting. Honestly, I don't know what you were expecting necessarily. Past that, we're going to have a ritual track over here, which is going to be a big source of points in the game, as well as additional actions. You're going to have these nightmares that are coming out doing their own thing. You're going to be building out towers, and towers can score points throughout the course of the game as well. And ultimately, the core mechanism of the game comes down to taking your actions. You're going to start the game with 5 action cards, representing the 5 core actions of the game. And whenever you take an action, you resolve the card that you have that action on, and then the opponents can either conform or dissent. Effectively, 2 different methods of following your action. So you do something, other people do something as well. What they do is going to depend on the cards they have, whether they've upgraded them, or the specific actions you've taken. You see the cards over here, you're going to start off with all the same 5 cards, except before the game even begins, you're all going to draw a unique upgrade card, in some way ensuring that you have a different advantage than the other players. Although it doesn't end there, not by a long shot. You see, across the course of the game, you're going to continuously be drawing cards from this deck of cards, and many of those cards are going to have various effects that you can do whenever you take the cards, the actions to play cards, but a lot of them will be upgrade cards. A lot of them will be cards that let you upgrade your tableau, ensuring that the actions you take are better and stronger than other players, and this is easily a huge highlight of the game for me. We'll talk about that more later. But effectively, that's what you're doing here. You're taking actions. You're going to have 5 core actions. You're going to utilize those actions to build up your towers. You're going to go ahead and recruit. You're going to summon various followers or whatnot to the various regions using different conditions or whatnot, depending on the card you have in play. It's always hard trying to explain the actions, being mindful of the upgraded versus non-upgraded actions. But let's say the basic summon action is going to let you go ahead and put more followers wherever your forts are. So you have one action is going to be building towers. One action is going to be summoning more followers. One action is going to be moving around the board and initiating combats. Another action is going to let you go up that ritual track, sacrificing units across the board in order to slowly advance on the track to get points and abilities. And then finally, you have the develop action, which is my personal favorite, in which you're going to go ahead and play cards, upgrade your tableau, and draw more cards. Those 5 actions are the core mechanisms of this game, as you slowly, turn after turn, are building the central cathedral over here, which will unlock Phase 2 of the Nightmare Cathedral. In Phase 2, the nightmares will enter the board. More specifically, every game is going to have 2 nightmares that you integrate. This prototype I have over here has 8 nightmares. I don't know what the final game does or doesn't have. That will all be, prototype subject to change kind of conversations there. But you're going to have 2 nightmares that represent different spins for how that end game proceeds, because each nightmare is going to come onto the board, and suddenly you now have the opportunities to start controlling nightmares. Because across the course of the game, there's basically 2 phases, and that also means 2 decks for every single phase. You have 2 dream decks, you have 2 conflict decks, you have 2 upgrade card decks. And suddenly these decks of cards are going to give you different ways to do different things, and suddenly controlling the nightmares, having them march around the board to do their nefarious things and engage in the board in different ways, different powerful and punishing ways, will be a huge part of the experience and completely change up the second half of the game. And that's basically what's going on in the Nightmare Cathedral. You're going to go around, you're going to resolve that. You're going to go ahead, and once you enter the second half of the phase, you're going to unlock a Devour track, which once enough units are devoured, that will trigger the end of the game. Alternatively, using this round track over here, once you have enough rounds going by, and the rounds are fairly long, it's not just this 1, 2, 3, 4, but once you have enough rounds going by, that's the other way the game can end, and that is the Nightmare Cathedral. Leaving out a whole lot of details, this is not a rules teach, this is a general overview, but area control, tableau building, action action selection, a bunch of aspects that I'll go into a bit when I complain or praise different parts of the game, and let's go ahead from there into the review. Because, like I said already, I had no real interest in this game. I saw this game pop up on GameFound as an upcoming game. The art, which, I mean, he has a huge following as far as people who are interested in his art and his works and in this game, but it doesn't do it for me personally. This whole nightmare shenanigan things, it doesn't pull me in on a personal level, and so combine that with not having a firm idea of what the game was, and I just wasn't that interested. I became interested once they reached out and said, hey, could you cover the game? And I looked into the game and I was like, well, this has got, you know, actions and upgraded tableaus and area control and all these other things that I kind of completely ignored when I saw the campaign page. They kind of spoke to me. And then when I played it, I liked it even more. Let's dive into ease of play, starting off the bat. And there's a decent amount of rules to the game itself. If you go through the rulebook, a decent amount to go through. Not overbearing, but certainly enough pages. The teach itself is actually not that complicated, though. The teach itself, it's fairly easy to go through the core concepts of the game, how you control an area, how the forts work, how the action selection works, and then going over the 5 core actions that you have to explain the game. Throw in a few little maintenance details that one player has to be aware of and the others do not, and it's a fairly easy teach, even though the rules are like 25 pages or so. And again, prototype all of that stuff. As far as the table space though, table space is a little larger than I'd like. This is one of those games that kind of feels like it could have been smaller, could have been more condensed. I mean, it's showing off the art, which for those who want that, that's great. But you're going to have this full board here, which is not small to begin with. Then you're going to have your Cathedral board over here, which for the first half of the game is going to track these Cathedral pieces, which all come apart. You're going to put them over here as you go through it. And then you're going to flip that to the Devour phase. Overall, between the cards, between the board, between everything, the game is a little bit on the large side. Not crazy, but a little bit on the large size. As far as game time is going to vary between your first and subsequent games. I find that first game is going to potentially cross that 2-hour mark, a little bit more going on, a little bit as far as trying to just track and get a feel for how the game plays. A lot of fun as you go through it, but still a little bit longer. Subsequent games do creep down. I believe they're aiming for sub 90 minutes. We haven't gotten there yet, but I believe we will, depending on, well, continuing to play this and dive into it. But I do see it falling into that 90 to 120 range after your first plays as you go through the game. Lastly, in the ease of play category, and this is very much in the prototype aspect of things, there are a lot of things that do kind of get in the way of the accessibility of the game. Starting off with the fact that you have to set up this entire board with this Cathedral, which is irritating. Speaking frankly, it's very irritating. This might be just a prototype issue, but the way you have to track how to place out your Cathedral pieces to ensure you're pulling them in the right order, the fact that you're going to have a lot of cards on the board that other players want to see at any given time. You want to see the various dream cards so that you can select them at the end of your turn so you can prep for the various objectives you're going for. The problem is it's very small text on a very small table with a bunch of players who are trying to see it, and you have things like that that kind of get in the way. And then you have symbology as well. Along this track, you're going to have a whole bunch of symbols that you have to remember. You're going to have symbols along the ritual track, and all those things would be very helpful in a player aid. They do have a player aid, which is double-sided and showing you the exact same thing. I'd rather have seen some of the symbols here so I don't have to constantly reference the rulebook. It is very easy to pick up, to be clear, but that first play certainly had a lot of constantly checking the rules to find the various symbols. It'd be great to have that either on a player aid or at the very least at the back of a rulebook. Again, this is a prototype, so some of those things may well happen. But as far as ease of play, a few nitpicks and complaints, but not the worst. As far as player count, this is a 1 to 4 player game. I've played this game at 2 and 3 players so far. Both are very fun, although I find myself being much more drawn to the 2-player experience, which I think is a combination of 2 factors. The first is the fact that at 2 players, I find that area control games are harder to come by, or at least area control games that work particularly well, and this works incredibly well at 2 players, at least based on my experiences so far. It also means that you don't have that victim, that aspect that you have in 3-player area control games, where 2 players fight each other a little too much, and that 3rd player can end up being stronger because of the other players clashing. And so 2 players doesn't have that because, well, it's the 2 of you. You have this AI shadows, and you have to interact with that how you will, but it's basically me versus you. I really liked it at 2-player for that reason, just the fact there's not a lot of area control games and you don't have that aspect. And then thirdly, going back to that accessibility issue, while your standard cards start off all the same and that's fine, as you upgrade cards until you have a good feeling for things, I'm kind of playing my game being mindful of the fact that I know what's going to trigger certain benefits for you, but I don't have a 100% firm idea of the various cards you have because of how many different upgrade cards there are in the game. And so you do have that potential problem as you go through it of being mindful of what your upgrades are, what the other players are, and the more players you have around the table, the more you have to track that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong, I very much did enjoy 3 players, but 2 players was definitely the highlight for me. As far as things I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, there's a lot going on here. And it just does a lot of things well. And we do have nitpicks, we do have complaints. I'll get into all of those. There's going to be a whole list of stuff, so don't worry, we got plenty of that. But starting off the bat, there's multiple pathways to victory here. There's multiple ways you can focus your attention. From the way you build out your cards can also give you points. From the way you move up the ritual track, from the way you build out your forts, from the way you focus on your dream cards, there are multiple pathways to victory here. And this is a game which conflict is present, but not overwhelming. You're going to be engaging with other players. You're going to have fights. You're going to have conflicts. But between the fact that you're going to be fighting with the shadow player as well, and very often there are incentives to fight with the shadow player because the conflict act will reward you with extras for victories, it means, and the fact that the conflict is not the be-all and end-all, there's a lot of reasons for you to build up your own thing. There's a lot of ways for you to move up the ritual track or to be mindful of the various other ways to move forward in this game. It means conflict is absolutely here, but it's not something that takes over the game. This is not a game where it's all about clash after clash after clash. This is a tactical combat game. This is going to be far more closer to a game like Inish than a game like Kemet. It's going to have combat as a present thing that you have to be mindful of and that you have to engage and work around, but not something that is the be-all and the exclusive focus of the game. And then the action puzzle, and this is something you might not like, and we'll touch upon that as well, but the action puzzle has its own interesting aspect going on. Effectively, when you take an action, you take your player, you take your little marker over here, and you're going to move it to any action that is not connected to your spot via those arrows. So for example, I can take one of these 3 actions. The balance there is other players can potentially benefit through conforming to your action if they are, as another player, are touching your spot. So for example, I can only go to these 3 spots right now, but if I go to either of these 2 players, that player, the green player over there, is going to get an extra benefit. So I have to be mindful of that. Alternatively, if I go over here, they will not get that extra benefit. So there's a little bit of an action puzzle as you ricochet around. As you move from location to location, I get the benefit. They shift down here. I move over here. I shift down there. And you're moving around trying to take these actions, juggling back and forth, and it does provide a bit of a minorly interesting puzzle. I will say, going back to my player count aspect, this action puzzle is the one area of the game that I did particularly find is significantly better at 3 players as opposed to 2. At 2, it's fine. It still gives me a bit of a challenge, but it's better at 3 because you're constantly choosing, well, someone might get a benefit. Who, how, and how much do I actually care as I go through it? Because again, no matter what happens, other players can follow with conforming or dissenting. But usually the conform benefit is stronger, and to that end, you have to be mindful of how much do you care about that particular action at this particular time, and are you willing to give the other player a slightly stronger benefit if you do so. There's also being mindful of what are they going to do next. Are they about to move next to start launching off battles? And if they do so, maybe I go ahead and I develop, because that way I'll go ahead and take a develop action. I'll gather cards, which, as I said already, that's my favorite action anyway. And now when they attack me, at least I'll get an even stronger benefit. So there's a little bit of a mind game of trying to predict what your opponent's going to do, of trying to be mindful of which actions to take, and trying to decide when to leave off your desired ideal action because it might give a slightly stronger ability to the other player. And speaking of the actions, upgrading your actions is absolutely my favorite part of this game. I think there's a lot of things I like about this game. But upgrading my actions, you're going to start with 4 basic actions and 1 upgraded action. Randomly upgraded, so you don't have a full agency over that. But that will, to a certain extent, give you a slightly different edge compared to the other players. But as you start drawing through the cards, you're going to get stronger and stronger actions. You're going to start upgrading all of your actions instead of just that one. But then, and more importantly, when you get to phase 2 of the game, the actions just get bonkers. You go from small modifications or adjustments to your actions to ridiculously over-the-top powerful actions. And that entire aspect of the game, that second phase and the escalation you see in the second phase, the escalation as the nightmares enter the board, as your actions and cards get stronger and more powerful, it gives a real strong sense of escalation to Nightmare Cathedral. Escalation that is, well, fun. It's powerful. That first time you find a phase 2 upgraded action, and that first time you play it, in the first game, the first time you play this game, and the first time you play one of those cards, and this won't mean anything to you, even just hearing me say it, you will have to sit down, play this game, and the first time you play one of those cards, you'll be like, wow. That's insane. I can't believe that that card does that. I can't believe that this card gives me that extra level of all the stuff it lets me do, and then combine that with the fact that I want to take all actions at all times. All the actions are helpful. All the actions are useful. It's a question of the when and the why. I want to move up the ritual track. I want to build more force. I want to recruit more units. I want to march around the board, and I want to play more cards. Every single thing in this game I want to do, and it's the order you do them in and how you combo them, and it is simple, and it is fast-paced, and it is satisfying to do so. You move your guy, you take an action. Move the turn marker, take an action. Take an action, take an action. And then on your turn, I'm still benefiting. I'm either getting a descent bonus when you, well, don't go where I want, or I'm getting a conform bonus, which is even stronger or more powerful. This game gives you a constant feedback loop of just having fun things, of upgrading a tableau, of doing fun stuff as you slowly charge towards the end, getting victory points or just general growth and fun stuff all along the way. As far as things I don't like, and there are things I don't like, first of all the stuff around accessibility and cards and all those things. I mean, it is hard to see everything going on, and maybe that will change if I'm, 7 or 8 plays deep, but for right now, sure, I know the basic cards, that's pretty easy. Knowing that my Perform Ritual over here is the same as your Perform Ritual, great, we're fine. But once you upgrade yours, I don't really know what's going on, and then I want to see the dream cards. And sometimes I just say, pass me a card from the top, because I can't be bothered to ask you for the 4th time what those 3 dream cards are, and I'm pretty sure they're the same as last time, but I'm not entirely sure. And then the nightmare cards. Once the nightmare cards come out, you basically have to pass these around to the other players so they can all read them, and then you have to pass them again and again and again so that you can all read them. This goes back to, I'd kind of want to see some sort of play area that just shows me all the nightmares at a glance, so I don't have to constantly pass these around. Again, not the end of the rule, not by a long shot, but still slightly irritating, just the amount of accessibility around seeing everything, touching everything, all of that. As far as setting up the Cathedral, which I talked about as well, I don't love this whole initial turn tracker. This turn tracker, at the end of every turn, you're going to be taking one of the Cathedral pieces and slowly building that center Cathedral, which is fine, it's nice. I like the second phase of the game. I do like the fact that the game is kind of split into a rewarding build phase and then a nightmare phase where everything escalates to the next level. I do enjoy that. I don't love the fact that it's all on this track and you just take a piece every single turn. We forgot half the time. Well, did we take on your turn? Did we? Oh, we did. Let's count it up. Okay, great. We got it. We did it. It gives you little bonuses along the way. But as far as I'm concerned, they could have just simply said, play the first round of the game. And when the first round of the game is done, throw the Nightmare Cathedral in play. That would have worked for me just as well without having the extra degree of maintenance or management around things. You'd have to figure out what you're doing about the various bonuses as you go. But I just felt the Cathedral, the first and second phase, I like the way they handled it, felt a little bit more tedious, almost for the sake of building a cathedral, which is nice, but didn't necessarily impact the gameplay as much as I would like, and just felt like there was more extra work. While on the subject of small little annoyances, the way these towers click together is irritating. You see, these towers basically have like 4 different, 5 different, 6 different holes or whatever it is, and you kind of have to find the exact interlocking point for them to click. Not a big deal, but I feel that could have been designed differently to make it more accessible. These are all small nitpicks, to be clear, but they are nitpicks nonetheless. And then I think the biggest thing for me, well, the biggest 2 things for me, are going to be what I said already, which is the theme and the art simply do not do it for me. I'm not against the game because of them, not by a long shot, but I just wasn't pulled in by the theme and the art, and that remains true even now. For me, it's the game that's carrying me forward, it's the game that has me excited, it's not the theme, the art, or any of that that has me excited, or the miniatures or sculpts. They're all fine, they do the job, it just doesn't perfectly capture it for me. As far as gameplay complaints, I have one. Gameplay complaints, I don't love the fact that the Conform and Descent on many cards, and this changes as you level up your upgrades to your cards, but the Conform and Descent sometimes are not as far apart as I would like. One of my favorite parts of the game is that aspect of choosing which actions to take and when to deny your opponent a conform action. And sometimes that decision is less tense than I would like because it's not that big a deal, but the difference between the 2 actions. So I kind of wish there was almost an additional gap so that that decision was even more punishing and something you have to be even more considerate of how important is it to you to, summon right now. Because if you summon right now, they're going to get a bonus, and you need to be mindful of that. So I kind of wish the gap was a bit larger. Again, that does help as players upgrade their cards, but early game, certainly I could use more of a gap there. As far as things I can see others not liking, few small things. First of all, the action selection. It's a little confusing. You kind of pick it up pretty quickly and it's not the end of the world, and I do understand why it exists and I like what it adds to the game, but it could be a little irritating to just, why not just take actions? Why this whole conform, descent, all of that? It has been frustrating for some players initially when they first started playing. Not a big deal, but something that could be an issue. The ritual track, I can see players wanting that to be a bit more exciting. I mean, honestly, I'm always fine with more powers and abilities. If you watch my channel, you know that. But the ritual track often has these large gaps. I don't really talk about the ritual track that much, but the ritual track effectively involves you destroying or sacrificing units on the board in order to move along these things. You have to sacrifice units from the matching symbols, and along the way, these blue spots will give you powers and abilities, and as you go further up the track, you'll lock in victory points. But the ritual track is good, and it has moments in there that are fun. It has moments where you can control the nightmares on the board, and other things like that. It has moments where you can go ahead and move your shaper around the board, and then turn one of your opponent's units into your own, but I could see people wanting more stuff on that track. I certainly wouldn't say no to it, but it didn't particularly bother me. Additionally, there's lots of card play in this game. If you are someone that likes clean, smooth area control games that don't have tons of cards that you don't know what they're doing, this might not be a game for you. At the end of the day, there's going to be lots of card play, and there's going to be lots of card play in this game. Lots of cards that you don't necessarily know or are able to anticipate what's going to happen the next time your opponent takes a develop action. And so there's lots of powers and abilities and lots of things in the background of this otherwise very clean area control game. And there's luck of the draw as well. There's luck of the draw in terms of what dream cards you draw. There's luck in the draw in terms of the conflict deck. Whenever you fight against the shadows, you're going to draw a conflict card, and that's something you want to be mindful of as well. And there's luck of the draw in terms of what cards you draw from the deck. Do you get the upgrades you want that work with your abilities, or maybe not so much? And so there's definitely luck of the draw in this game. And then lastly, and potentially important, I don't really know, depending on what you're looking for, the nightmares in this game are devastating in a way that is tremendously fun. Remember how I said conflict is not a huge part of this game? Well, that can be more true in the first half of the game, where conflict is there and it's present and you want to be mindful of it, but once the nightmares enter the board, depending on which nightmares you're playing with, they can be absolutely game-breaking in how they wipe the field and change the game state in ways that are tremendously fun when you are the player controlling the nightmare, arguably less so when you are the player who's not controlling the nightmare. And so that might be a good thing, it might be a bad thing. I love the sense of escalation this game gives. I love that first phase as you build towards this incredibly pivotal second phase of the game. But the second phase is punishing and devastating and mean, which could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on who's doing what in the game. As far as final thoughts on Nightmare Cathedral, I like this game. I like this game a lot. That should probably be evident from me going through it. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. I initially had no interest, like I said already. It's a game that didn't really pull me in, but it was absolutely excellent once I started to dive into it. I learned the game, I sat down, I taught it, and I started taking actions, and every action felt more and more rewarding. Once I got a feeling for the cycle of the game, once I realized I wanted to do everything, I wanted to improve everything, every time I took an action, it was fun and it was rewarding. And then more importantly, every time you took an action or they took an action, it was rewarding everyone. Everyone was constantly getting stuff. They're constantly drawing cards, constantly, I didn't really talk about how battle works. Battle mostly comes down to playing cards and then being mindful of the number of symbols of shields and attacks, and you can play cards equal to the number of units you have in the battle. So a little extra thing going on there, and a great way to get rid of cards that aren't otherwise helping your engine. But everything in this game is so much fun, and it's fast-paced. It moves quickly once you get up and running. I would say that even though the game initially, like the first game was well over 2 hours, and subsequent games got lower, but at no point did I feel like I wasn't having my turn. Things kept on moving. When it was somebody else's turn, you were still getting extra benefits. You were still mindful of what they were doing, how they were moving around the board, and those little perks you got along the way. So again, I only played at 2 and 3 players, but I would even be willing to play this at a 4-player game as well. Like it would work. I think 2 to 3 is going to be my sweet spot, 2 preferred, but this is a lot of fun, and it works really well as a 2-player game, which is great, considering that the number of area control games I have that work at 2 that work well at 2, I should say, are not as many as I'd like. Overall, Nightmare Cathedral surprised me. I do have complaints. I do have nitpicks. I don't know. I mean, this is a prototype. I don't know what will or won't change. I really didn't love the Cathedral aspect. That just felt like an extra degree of maintenance for the sake of having something pretty on the board. I like the 2 phases of the game. I don't like the way they implemented that. But overall, a really solid experience that I can easily recommend. This is over on GameFound. You can check that out. Link in the description down below and all that stuff. If you like area control games, if you like 2-player area control games, this is one that really surprised me. As far as rating on this one, I'm giving it a 4 to 5 for right now, and it's a tentative 4 to 5. It's the kind of thing where I can see this going up. I don't think it would go down. I could be wrong, but I can see it going up depending on the final game. There were a bunch of accessibility issues that kind of got in the way that made it feel like it could use a little bit more refinement or development, but I really liked it where it was anyway. And it's always a little awkward saying a game needs more refinement or development, like as if I know better from my 4 plays. Yeah. Anyways, as far as other game recommendations, I can recommend Antique Duellum. If you're looking for another 2-player area control game that works particularly well, I really enjoy Antique Duellum. It's usually my go-to for the genre. And if you want something that kind of feels the same while being very different, Chaos in the Old World is going to be a game that has that darkness and that thematic aspect to the game, in which area control is very, very present, in which you upgrade your tableau, in which area control is there, but combat's not always the be-all and end-all, lots of powers and abilities and card play and other things like that. At a high level, this kind of gave me Chaos in the Old World old vibes. Very different though, so if you love that one, don't be disappointed if you get this and find it's not what you were expecting. Also, apologies for recommending 2 games that are both out of print that you'll have to hunt down on the secondhand market to actually get your hands on them. But, I mean, recommendations are what they are. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.